At a moment when Jesus is unleashing the gospel in the world for the very first time, he reveals himself as the Good Shepherd and tells us he's come into the world to lay down his life for the sheep. Laying down his life and then taking it up again. These are the two pivotal acts by which the Lord seeks to rescue his sheep from predators. The image he uses is the wolf. The point is that there are predators that prey upon human beings. Sin is a predator. Death, the devil, predators. And when the Good Shepherd comes and lays down his life and then takes it up again, he sets into motion a revolution. And that revolution is destined to transform the whole world. And I find it striking that at the moment he starts to talk to us about this unleashing of the gospel, he kind of goes off on what looks like a tangent. He raises a subject that doesn't seem related to this unleashing of the gospel. He talks about his other sheep. He puts it this way: I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. These also I must lead, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. I want to suggest that these two seemingly unrelated initiatives of Jesus, in fact, go together. They have everything to do with each other. And this is because whenever the gospel is unleashed, one of the greatest manifestations of its power lies in the way it transforms how we relate to the other. And what do I mean by the other? So I want to borrow from Archbishop Vigneron's Mass of Pardon that took place a year and a half ago. One of the petitions at that Mass from the prayers of the faithful was this: let us beg for pardon, because by failing to welcome and love the other, meaning the one who does not look like us and does not share the same ethnic, social, or economic status, by failing to welcome and love them, we have failed to love you, our Father. So who are these other sheep? They are those who don't look like us, those who don't dress like us. They may be from a different race or a different culture. They may be from a different economic class. But Jesus is saying that the gospel cannot impact the world the way that God intends it to if the people of God fail to allow the gospel to transform the way we relate to the other. Now, in the time of the New Testament, first century, St. Paul says in Ephesians 2 that there was between Jews and Gentiles a wall. And he calls it a wall of hostility. For the Jews, for the Gentiles, the Jews were a despised minority, second-class citizens. They were those people with all of their strange religious customs. They were the unwanted other. And then for the Jews, the Gentiles were their oppressors. Israel at that time was occupied territory. Foreigners were ruling the land, the Gentiles. And the litany of Gentile injustice against the Jewish people was endless. And then here you have Jesus saying in this gospel that he wants to bring them, that is, those Gentiles, into this Jewish church, and he wants to give them equal standing with his Jewish followers. Now, why does he want to do that? Because whenever the gospel is unleashed, it seeks to demolish the walls that divide us. The gospel, first thing it does is it leads us to a life-changing encounter with Jesus himself. But then the sign, one of the signs of having had that encounter is the walls within our hearts come down between us and the other. And in the first century, this happened, and it was revolutionary. You read about it all in the book of Acts. It was controversial, and it was revolutionary. It had the kind of impact that in Acts 17, these early Christians were described as people who had turned the world upside down. Now, our Archbishop seems to get this important connection. In leading us to unleash the gospel in a new way in Southeast Michigan, he's been calling upon us to demolish the walls that divide. So in preparation for the Synod in 2016, the Archbishop celebrated a Mass of Pardon at the cathedral. This was a solemn moment of purification for the local church, the Church of Detroit, of all the sins committed in the past. Sins that in many cases, the Archbishop said, had become part of the culture of the Archdiocese over time. And that means that those past sins were also present in the life of the church in 2016. One of the things that happened in the Mass, one of the sins that was addressed was how we treat the other. And it highlighted as a special case the church's treatment of African Americans. I want to share with you two petitions from a litany of pardon that happened at the very beginning of the Mass. Each petition begins with a scripture passage as the church lifts up before our eyes the vision from the scriptures of who it is we're called to be as God's people. And then what follows each petition is a request that we be pardoned for the ways that we have failed to be the people God has called us to be. So the first scripture is from Galatians. In Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female. And then the church began to ask for pardon for institutionalized racism, reflected by generations of neglect towards people most victimized by violent crimes, by infiltration of drugs in communities, by redlining, and by failed school systems. And all of the faithful that were present were invited to respond, "Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy." And there was a second petition that referenced the Acts of the Apostles. Chapter 15, verse 4 tells us that visitors to Jerusalem were welcomed by the church and by the apostles and presbyters, the priest. And then the church began to request pardon for all the times that we have not welcomed others to our parishes, and especially for the times that we have refused to allow African American Catholics into our parish communities. There's a sad history behind this petition. And I'm told that when it was voiced to the Lord, the atmosphere was pregnant with the presence of God. That it seemed as though the Lord had been waiting for the moment when his church would come before him and acknowledge how it had failed to welcome the other. And then a bishop told me, and a priest told me, that when the church confessed this sin, they felt that something broke. As all of the faithful responded, "Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy." I find that sometimes we are tempted to think that all of this is merely a matter of past sin. And some of my dear friends have even said to me things like this: "Why can't blacks just get over it and move on?" We have moved on, they will tell me. We put the past behind us. Why can't African Americans do the same? Well, lest it seem to us that this is merely a matter of past sins, unless we be tempted to wonder why some can't just get over it, let's talk for a moment about present issues. And not just anybody's present, but about our present here at Good Counsel. I don't know if you've noticed, but one of the exciting things that's been happening is that there are a few more African Americans that have been coming to join the parish. Have you noticed that? I've had the chance to meet a number of them. One of them told me that she had just celebrated her 3-month anniversary here in the church. Well, recently, she shared with Father John Ricardo and myself the following experiences that she's had in this 3 months period of time. Let me say, this lady's quite outgoing, very gregarious. And just about 2 weeks ago, she saw a parishioner who seemed to be in need. And when she approached our brother to offer her assistance, the only way I know to describe how she said what happened is this: he snorted at her. And after snorting, he called her the N-word. She responded, "I beg your pardon?" And he responded, "You heard me?" And from that moment, she says, the conversation began a downward spiral. And she realized that the best thing that she could do was to disengage and walk away, which she did. Father Ricardo and I, it broke our hearts to hear this. She went on to say it wasn't the only thing that had happened, and it wasn't the first thing that had happened. She explained that one day she went up to greet one of our parishioners. And again, God, hospitality just seems to run in her blood. She's really a beautiful person. So she's practicing one of our values, right? This radical hospitality we talk about. So she sees this guy she doesn't know. She goes up to greet him. And this was the response that she got: "I don't deal with blacks. I don't live around them. I don't socialize with them. I don't deal with blacks." And he walked away. She said to me that though she has lived and worked in the marketplace over many years, never has she been so insulted because of race as she has been in the past 3 months. And to think that these things occurred, of all places, in the house of God. The Holy Roman Catholic Church. The only word I have to say about this is outrageous. This is outrageous. I asked myself a question. Is this typical of the OLGC parishioner? Now, you know, I've been here almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in July. And thanks be to God, when I asked myself that question, the answer was, you bet it is not typical. Thank God it's not typical. And then I asked myself a different question. Can this kind of sin kill our mission, which is to offer everyone who comes in our door a life-changing encounter with Jesus Christ. And when that person is the other, we tear the walls down. And you know what my answer to that question was? Oh, you bet it can destroy and kill our mission. All that needs to happen is for word to get out on the street that OLGC is not a safe place for people of color. All that needs to happen is for the gossip on the street to be that at OLGC, Jim Crow is still alive. That we might as well hang signs that say, "For whites only," on our front door. But that's not what we want, is it? And it sure isn't what I want. But even more important, it is not what Jesus wants. Jesus wants his gospel to so transform our lives that it transforms the way we relate to the other. And sometimes the other who comes among us is black. But sometimes the other is white. Depends on who you are. Sometimes the other is the one who comes into the door with a mohawk haircut and tattoos everywhere. And sometimes the other is the one who comes in with green hair. And I think for me, sometimes the other is when, it's hard to talk about this one, but my dad, when I was a kid, was always after me about how I dressed. Keep those pants up, neat, belt on. But today it's fashionable. You get the picture to wear those pants in such a way where the first thing that comes to my mind is I want to say, boy, pull up those pants. You see, it's the other. The other. Jesus wants to create in his church a venue where whoever the other is, he feels safe. Jesus wants to create a venue called the church, that whoever the other is, he feels respected, loved, his humanity cherished. Jesus wants the other to become our brother. He's not aiming at tolerance. He's not aiming at political correctness. Jesus' aim is the transformation that happens when we learn to love like he loves. What a moment, my friends, it is for the church. What an opportunity. I don't know if you know, I lived in France for a while. And I won't forget the time when a Frenchman came up to me and he said, "When will America get past its trouble with race?" And you know what that told me? The world is waiting for that moment. Do you realize that there are nations out there that will tell America, don't talk to us about human rights. You solve the racial strife in the United States, and then we will listen. The world is waiting. What a moment for the church this is. Because I hope it's no newsflash, government doesn't have the answers. How long have we waited on government? And look at the mess we're in today. One Catholic leader put it this way. He says, the world is waiting for signs of faith that can be seen by those who have no faith. I love that. A sign of Easter faith is the transformation that happens in the way we relate to the other. He says it doesn't take faith yourself to recognize the sign, because the world is hungry for the sign. The world is hoping for the sign. Will the church be the sign that causes our neighbor in the world to rise up and say, those Catholics have something to teach us? May it be so, my friends. May we give the gospel the permission it is looking for to transform the way that you and I relate to the other.